We saw how the building of the city and the tower was an example of humans holding the truth in unrighteousness, denying the existence of the God who made them, and instead seeking to build a civilization that only glorifies man and not God. And we saw also how such atheists are always claiming they don't need the crutch of religion, but are in fact using all kinds of other addictive things as crutches to help them through life, and that really the city and the Tower of Babel was really just one big crutch to reassure that proud society of their own validity in the universe because they were afraid of being scattered. Now we're going to look closer tonight at why God didn't approve of the Tower of Babel, and we'll see how God fixed that hopeless situation. Genesis 11 verse 4. They said, "Let us go down, let us build." People said, "Let us build a city and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, "Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do." God came down to see this huge city and tower that people were building, and he didn't like what he saw. He didn't like it because the humans' building of this city represented a human retreat from reality, a retreat from God. It was a retreat from and a rejection of God's instructions to mankind to go into all the world and subdue it and replenish it with human life. Remember, Christ said to born-again Christians we're to go into all the world and to preach the gospel to every creature. And in Genesis, God had told the first people that they were also to go into all the world and subdue it and replenish it. So when Jesus in the New Testament, thousands of years later, said go into all the world and preach, he was expecting that everybody would already be all around the world ready to get on with this work. But that has not been the case. Look at the actual instructions God gave us in Genesis 1:26. God said, Genesis 1:26, God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." Verse 27, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful, and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it." And again, God said the same thing to Noah and his sons after God had removed the whole of civilization by drowning the world in a flood because they didn't get it right the first time. So in a brand new start, after the flood, Noah says to the family of just 8 people who are going to start the world population all over again, in Genesis 9 verse 1, God tells humans again what we're supposed to be doing on earth. Genesis 9:1, God blessed Noah and his sons and said unto them, "Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth." Replenish means to fill it up. Fill up the earth with humans. That's God's orders to us as the human race. But it seems to be yet another thing that society today gets wrong. Oh, the population explosion, they say. Earth is overpopulated. There isn't enough for everybody, and there isn't room for the tigers. They say, what, the tigers? You know, I read the other day that one tiger needs to have the equivalent space of 20 football pitches of jungle to live in. How big is your flat? And what are you paying for it? Did IQs just drop sharply this century? You're paying half your monthly salary for a bedsit of just 20 square metres, but the tiger, he's got to have 20 football pitches. And what's more, you're supposed to send money to the World Wildlife Fund to help the tiger get it. 20 football pitches per tiger, and they're worried about my carbon footprint? Well, I'm not helping any tigers. And why not? Because the Bible tells me not to. Genesis 9, verse 2. Listen to what God says to us about tigers. Genesis 9:2, and the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth. Into your hand are they delivered. Verse 3, every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you. Verse 7, be ye fruitful and multiply. Bring forth abundantly in the earth and multiply therein. So you see, nearly everything modern society is doing today is wrong. They've got it all completely backwards. People are doing the opposite to what the Bible's instructions say. No wonder the world's in the mess it's in. God's instructions here say that we need more babies in the world. Not 4,000 abortions a week. We need to expand human life into every corner of the world and chase away or eat any animal that stands in our way. Let the tigers die, not the baby in your own womb. God instructed the human race to subdue the creation, to dominate nature, and to multiply abundantly into the whole earth. But the advanced civilization of free thinkers who travelled with Nimrod to the plain of Shinar said, oh, no thank you, we don't want to do that. We don't want to spread out. This is far enough for us. We like it just here in the plain of Shinar. It's perfect for what we've got planned. We don't want to be scattered across the whole earth. We don't want to subdue and replenish the earth for God's glory. We're only interested in our glory. We're going to stay right here where it's just perfect and glorify ourselves. We're going to define what human civilization is, and what it is a big self-governing city right here. Oh, yes, we might spread out in time. The city will sprawl and it will grow as other people come to join us. We'll be so famous and fantastic, other people will be drawn to our great city in the middle of this great plain of Shinar like ants converging on a honeypot on a picnic rug. And that's the big difference, God. We're not moving out there to fill up the world. Instead, we'll grow because people will come to us. We are the rulers now, said these people in Babel. We are the centre of the world. We're the central authority of civilization, not you, God. We control our own lives, and we're not going to move just because you tell us to. We know what's best for the planet, and what's best is a beautiful city where we make the rules, wear what we like, and live how we like. This is our city, our life. God, keep out. And so they started to build this city with the tower so high from the top of it they were planning to be able to see for miles. They could see any enemy approaching in the distance, probably a week before they got there. Nothing would be able to sneak up on the Babel people unawares, let alone God. Nimrod, the mighty hunter, had approved the design, made sure nothing could threaten the strength of the city. This is quite a wealthy neighbourhood around here that we're situated around here. Philip's just been knocking on doors, posting things through the letterboxes, like he said, half a dozen of the rest of you. And you can usually tell which are the wealthiest households. It's the ones with the most locks on the doors. If you knock on their doors, as we sometimes have, to invite them down the hill to the church, you can often hear several bolts and locks being slid back before the door opens a crack. And it's true that there is crime in the area. But the security on the doors of private houses, it's not so much proportional to the actual crime rate. What it's proportional to is how rich people are, because the more they have in this life, the more scared they are of losing it. And so the more locks are on their doors. But in poorer parts of town, there might be only one lock on the doors, because these people own less. They have less worth stealing. Sometimes I've even found front doors left ajar, just hanging open, and I've just knocked and the door has swung open, and I've carefully stepped in, found myself just right in someone's front room, and there they are sitting watching TV. Some little old man or woman, people with nothing much in this life worth stealing, so no great fear of losing anything. They'd sooner just have the company, even of a stranger. And so the door hangs open a crack in hope of a visitor, any visitor. Sometimes that sort even offer you a cup of tea. Out of the true riches of their poverty, they give to you. But that doesn't happen very often. But it has happened. In Revelation chapter 3, verse 20, Christ says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come in to him, and I will sup with him, and he with me." If we don't hang on to our possessions too tightly, we'll stand a much better chance of receiving a greater blessing from God. But this city of Babel was a maximum security operation, not a land to be tilled and tended and tithed on for God's glory according to God's instructions, but an idol to be worshipped and served and built up over higher and worshipped and protected at all costs. A monument to the power of man, built to keep strangers out, and in fact built specifically to keep God out. In the book of Haggai, chapter 1, verse 3, "Then came the word of the Lord by Haggai the prophet, saying, Is it time for you, O ye, to dwell in your sealed houses, and this house lie waste? Now therefore, thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. Ye have sown much, and bring in little. Ye eat, but ye have not enough. Ye drink, but ye are not filled with drink. Ye clothe you, but there is none warm. And he that earneth wages to put into a bag with holes. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. Go up to the mountain and bring wood and build the house, and I will take pleasure in it, and I will be glorified, saith the Lord. Ye looked for much, and lo, it came to little. And when ye brought it home, I did blow on it. Why, saith the Lord of hosts? Because of my house that is waste, and ye run every man unto his own house." Everybody's running to their own house round here, aren't they? Not to the Lord's house. At Babel, the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded, and he didn't like what they were doing. Why? Because these people were only glorifying themselves and were not rich toward God. They're building nothing for God, and in the long run will find only poverty and failure. Timothy 6:9, "They that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare." A snare, that's another word for a trap. A chain around your wrist, something that catches you unawares. A snare, you catch your leg in it. It's a trap for an animal usually. It will slow you down. If you will be rich, that means people who are just concentrating on getting money, the getting of money, and the getting of security through money, they will fall into temptation and a snare around you. It will slow you down, hinder you, mess up your life, and fall. The verse continues, 2 Timothy 6:9, "And they will fall into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition." That's what happens to people who just concentrate on trying to be rich. and only building a life on earth as if there was no afterlife to consider. This was what was going to happen to the people of Babel, just building this marvelous city. That was the main thing for them, to get their life sorted out on earth as if there was no afterlife to consider. They get snared, trapped for a while, sometimes trapped for longer, sometimes trapped forever, depending on when you see the light eventually. What happened to the people building Babel? They got snared because they were minded only on earthly things and building themselves palaces in this life. They got snared. I've got a snare around my wrist. It's quite an expensive watch. And let me tell you, it's nothing but worry owning this thing. Now, I didn't buy it. I could never afford such a watch, but I'd never have chased after owning one either. But I inherited this watch. It came from my step-grandfather, who died about 4 years ago. It was his. And my step-grandfather himself, he wouldn't normally have been able to afford such a watch either. But he was an old soldier. He fought in World War II, and in the 1960s, the watch company temporarily offered a special budget-priced model of their watch just to British Army personnel at a reduced price, an ex-serviceman. And this is it. And this Remembrance Sunday, I'll take the liberty of just saying a little bit more about my step-grandfather, the old World War II soldier. His name was Harry, and he was actually the first Allied soldier into Rome when they liberated it from the Germans in 1944. Rome being the city where I ironically now live. Now, you may say that's unlikely that your step-grandfather was the first man into Rome, but somebody had to be first in, and it just happened to be Harry, my step-great-grandfather. Now, officially, it was the American army who liberated Rome, but the day before that, the British Army sent in a single lone scout, and that scout was Harry. And there were actually two of them in a jeep, Harry and his driver, and the word was that the German army had just fled from Rome a couple of days before because they'd heard that the Americans and the British were coming and the game was up. It was near the end of the war. So Harry and his driver drove cautiously into Rome up the Via Appia, and the city seemed deserted except for a lone German sniper who put a bullet through the driver's eye, killing him. The jeep crashed, and my step-grandfather carried on into Rome on foot, alone. And the city was almost deserted. There was hardly a sound, because most of the inhabitants were still afraid to come out of their houses until they were absolutely sure that the Germans had really left. But eventually Harry met an Italian who took into a cave nearby where the Nazis had executed 335 Italian civilians in cold blood just over 2 months previously. The bodies had begun to rot, and they were stacked 3 to 5 high, higgledy-piggledy in a cave, just like sacks of potatoes. My step-grandfather wept and then returned to his unit to report what he'd seen. The cave, the site of the massacre, is also, ironically, literally a stone's throw away from where my daughter, Harry's step-great-granddaughter, has been going to high school for the past 5 years, 60 years later, because that's where we live now. Now, when he died in 2006, Harry left 2 wristwatches. His army watch, which he'd worn that day in Rome in 1944, still functioning, and this posh one. My father had the task of dispersing Harry's modest estate after he died, and he generously allotted the posh watch to me. He kept the army watch for himself. But actually, I would have sooner had the army watch. It has very little cash worth, but it would mean more to me. The expensive watch, on the other hand, is a constant worry to me. Because of its cash value, I'm scared of it getting stolen. It's a snare, really. In Italy, we can't get reasonably priced home insurance, so we don't have any. So every time I go out, I wear the watch. And yet when I'm wearing the watch when I'm out, I'm worried that somebody's going to steal it from me on the tube, because there's many pickpockets in Rome. So I'm afraid to leave it at home. I'm afraid to have it with me. It's a snare. I'd sooner have had the cheap army watch than this one, because it would mean more to me. I'd sooner have Jesus than great wealth and possessions, because great wealth and possessions are nothing but a worry to you. They're a snare. But Jesus means more to me, and he should mean more to you. Because Jesus is not a snare. Jesus has done the opposite to a snare and has set us free from sin and death. He's set us free from worrying about what we have in life. Set us free from thinking we have to prove ourselves to the world all the time. Set us free from putting all those locks on our door. Your possessions can come to possess you. They can be a hindrance and spoil your quality of life and block out the only person who can save you and give you abundant life, God. Proverbs 11 says, there is he that scattereth and yet increaseth. That's me. There's him that just gives his substance away and anything, just gives it away. There is he that scattereth and yet increaseth. And there is he that withholdeth more than is right, but it tendeth to poverty. The people who built the city and Tower of Babel didn't want to scatter or be scattered. They were totally caught up in building their perfect home. They had expensive watches, but God needed to show them that that wasn't the correct way to live. And as humans, not just as Christians, but as humans generally, our real home is God. That's the home we were made for. Acts chapter 17, verse 28. What does that say? Acts 17, verse 28. For in him, that's God, for in God we live and move and have our being. In God. As certain also of your own poets have said, for we are also his offspring. In God we live. God is our home. There is no sensible reality to life for those who reject God and try to live outside of God and try to keep God outside of them. But that's what they were doing at Babel, building a life which was the very opposite from what God had intended and instructed. And they were clever, and they were resourceful, and they were determined to do this. Genesis 11 verse 3 says that they had no stone to build the city, but they had clay to make bricks with and slime for the mortar to cement the bricks together. God has gifted the human race with so much intelligence. And yet how many of our finest human minds are actually using their intelligence and their great gifts of planning and management and enterprise to glorify God and fulfill God's intentions for earth? Very few. Instead, our best and brightest of the race are using their intelligence just to make their own society, making theatre and music and fashion and cities just so houses can be built and sold to make money. Others are working in science and in medicine. And you may say, well, surely medical research is a good thing. Yes, it is. But what good does medical research do if people are fit and healthy and living longer without pain or discomfort, if it's only so that they can live lives that don't glorify God? Where's the sense in living longer if you're still going to go to hell in the end? You see, it's all about making man better. It's all about curing man. Everything's about life being better for man. Even those who profess to helping nature and the environment, they're only doing it to make the planet a better and happier place for man. They've got this vision, this idea that man himself is just a part of nature, that man is just dust of the universe, and that the highest form of good and happiness will result if we can just get in balance, in harmony with nature. It's called the Gaia theory. And then man will at last have evolved to his highest state of perfection. But their big mistake is that they completely leave God out of the equation. And that's the ultimate definition of sin. Sin is the reckless, self-centered stupidity which denies that you have been made, not just happened, and instead insists that you just happened and therefore have no moral responsibility to a higher cause. Sin is constructing a view of the universe which denies the existence of God, even though the evidence for God can be clearly seen all around you. Sin is holding the truth in unrighteousness, as we read this morning. Romans 1 verse 19. Because that which may be known of God is manifest in them. Romans 1:19. That which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God hath showed it unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. People are without excuse, but still they give not God the glory. They keep all the glory for themselves. Everything man builds is all about man, not about God. From the Tower of Babel to the garden trellis fence he buys at home base and erects in his garden on Sunday morning when he should be in church, praising and thanking his Maker instead. I'm not even going to get to Jesus in this sermon. Jesus is the icing on the cake. Jesus is just something profoundly wonderful that God did for you, as well as just allowing you the privilege of existing in his universe at all. Human beings are so selfish and blind and proud that you do not even deserve to live a finite mortal life, let alone be redeemed to live eternally with your Creator, who shed his blood himself so that you could get there. And so in Genesis 11 verse 5, the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men had builded, and he looked around and said, "Oh, what are they building now? My goodness, the same old guff, held together with slime." Now, there's nothing wrong with cities. There's nothing even wrong with big cities. Remember how when Adam and Eve were sent out into the world, and again when Noah and his family were given a new start after the flood, God told them to go forth and multiply, replenish the earth all over it. And so with all that multiplying going on, we have to live somewhere. Cities are fine. God's got nothing against London or New York. Cities are not wicked places just because they're cities. I've lived in cities and I've lived in the countryside. I've lived in little villages of only 40 people, where my nearest neighbour was a mile away across open fields. And I can tell you, the people of those tiny, pretty little countryside villages are every bit as wicked and sinful and filthy and scheming and perverted and depraved and dissipated as anyone in London is. So a city isn't the problem. It's what this city of Babel represented. And what this city of Babel represented was a society united in belief that it does not need God and is therefore better than God. The idea that if all men get together in world peace, then we can build the perfect utopia in which God is not needed. In fact, all mention of God is outlawed. Mankind will unite and make the true and living God illegal. As a matter of fact, they've already started. And one of the identifying characteristics of the spirit of Antichrist in the last days is that he will bring peace to all nations and unify the world for a short time in a perfect and contented society in which there will be no religious disagreement, because religion will have been officially abolished. Antichrist will introduce a new religion to the world, but prior to that, the world stage will have been set ready to receive that new religion by first sweeping all other religions away. It will have become a crime to bring up the subject of God in public, a risky business, because then you will be seen as divisive instead of diversive. If you mention God, you will be regarded as a cancerous troublemaker in man's perfect society. You'll be a square brick not fitting in with the beautifully carved and harmonious round bricks of which the wonderful city of man has been built and the Tower of Babel was built. May Christians be on their guard when we see signs of that sort of society coming to pass. Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world." Whilst we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord. If you are comfortable and at home in your earthly body and in your earthly home and in this society today, which mankind proudly builds and proudly calls home, then you are absent from the Lord. Are we too hot? Anybody feeling sleepy? Can perhaps whack off some heat, maybe? You are such as they who built a city and a tower whose top may reach heaven to make you a name, but it will do you no good. For Jesus said, "Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." Is your treasure and your heart only on earth, invested in the dazzlingly inventive and clever society which man is building around us? It will pass away. As the house on the sand which the rain and the wind beat on, God can destroy treasure on earth at a stroke. God can destroy man's works with a single, elegant, masterfully bloodless stroke, if he likes, just as he did at the Tower of Babel, not with blood, not by killing, but simply by completely stopping and making a nonsense of their city tower, just by making everyone speak a different language, after which they couldn't continue building. That was all it took. The Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded, and the Lord said, "Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them which they've imagined to do. Go to, let us go down and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Rather than trust your human pride and ingenuity, it's better for us to store up our treasure and therefore our heart in heaven, where it shall be safe and well with your soul forevermore. Now, in my life, this is not the first time I've preached on the subject of the Tower of Babel. The last time I preached on Babel was in 1995. And back then, 15 years ago, I ended the sermon pretty much just how I've ended it now. Because in 1995, there was nothing more to say on the subject. But in 2010, there is something more to say about Babel. Let me ask you two questions. Question one, how were those ancient people able to start to build that enormous and mighty tower? What was the one most powerful thing that they had to equip themselves with for this vast construction project against God? And question two, how was God able to stop them? The answer to both questions is the same thing. The answer is in verse 1 of chapter 11 of Genesis. It says, "The whole earth was of one language and one speech." It was their language. That was their greatest tool. They all spoke the same language. That was what made building the tower possible and easier. Verse 6 of Genesis 11, "The Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they've imagined to do." The people all spoke the same language. And because of that, they were of one speech, one mind, one culture. God said the people are one. That's why they were so easily and determinedly cemented together in purpose to defy God and build the utopia of man instead. They were as cemented in language and culture and purpose as the bricks they were cementing together with the slime they found to make this new civilization with. And with such a determined cementing of their minds in this one language, nothing can stop them now doing all kinds of powerfully unholy stuff. But I'm not worried, said God, because all I need to do is to confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So that's what he did. God made everybody speak a different language so that it became instantly impossible to work together. Without speaking the same language, the people of the world could never get organized enough again to be able to build a united civilization against God. And so has it always been since then. Everybody all over the world talking different languages made it impossible for humanity to make a united, concerted effort against God ever again. Until now. Because what do we have in this world in this year, 2010, that we did not have in 1995 when I last preached on the Tower of Babel? The internet. I had nothing to add to this sermon in 1995. I couldn't see it coming. There was no internet then. Oh yeah, the internet was there in 1995. People like Mark back there, very techno-savvy kids, they'd been using it since about 1987, but it was nothing like it is today. In 1995, most people still did not even own a computer at home, let alone have an internet connection. But now they do. The internet is the new Babel because it is a worldwide common language. There's nothing intrinsically bad about the internet, just as there's nothing intrinsically bad about cities. The internet itself is not sinful. But the problem is what the internet is used as. And what it's used as is as a unifying communication network which spreads a unified human ideology. Nearly everybody in the developed Western world uses the internet today. Out of a world population of 7 billion, 2 billion people are currently connected to the internet. That's about 30% of the world are connected, and it's growing daily. When I first got connected to the internet nearly 14 years ago, the most significant thought that fascinated me was how I could chat to a German or an American or an Italian or an Asian on the other side of the world and discover that we both liked the same book or the same song or the same movie. And this was something which millions of other people were simultaneously discovering on the internet in the 20th century when it flowed into the 21st century. That is to say, despite geographical boundaries, we were discovering as a human race that there needed no longer to be any cultural barriers and boundaries. We were all the same inside, all human with similar tastes and similar beliefs. But that's the problem, because my beliefs are not the same as other people's. Because I am a Christian. I am bought and paid for and redeemed by the blood of Christ. I am in this world, but not of it. Shall I tell you who I am? Here is a description of who I am in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9, and it's also a description of who you are if you are a Christian today. I am a chosen generation. We Christians, born again, here today, are a chosen generation. 1 Peter 2 verse 9, but ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, an holy nation, a peculiar people, that ye should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvellous light, which in time past were not a people, but now are the people of God. We Christians are the people of God, but the world hates us just as it always has. And the world wants us Christians to shut up and go away. And in 2010, using the internet, the world is now very effectively managing to do that. Because through the internet, everybody now speaks the same language. It's not just that more and more people in the world can speak English. It's that they are speaking together in blogs, in chat rooms, in web forums, on YouTube, on Facebook, on MySpace. The world is uniting in a common language and in a common universal culture. For the first time in world history since the Tower of Babel, 30% of the world is connected, wired together in a common culture, speaking the same language. Do you see where this is going? I spend a lot of time debating religion on the internet and reading and listening and watching what the world thinks about Jesus Christ. And the main thing I see is that this new universal connected culture hates Jesus Christ. The world always did hate Jesus Christ, but the difference today is that they're all now connected in the same language. A guy in England gets together with a guy in Germany, with a guy in America, and with a guy in Italy, and with a guy in India, and together they watch a video on YouTube made by some atheist which says that Christians are crazos and troublemakers, and these guys watching in all their own countries say together, "Yay, that's right! Let's silence those Christians! Let's shut God out of this world society!" And they can do it. Facebook and Google now censor out anything that they decide is hate speech, anything that doesn't fit in with the universal politically correct view that's now held by nearly everybody in the free world under 40 years old. They block it. And this has happened just in the last 6 or 7 years. 30% of the world now officially considers Christians to be the scum of the earth. And you may say, well, it doesn't matter, because I don't use the internet, and the internet isn't real life. But the internet is real life now. The internet is the world, and the world is the internet. And the internet is world culture, and world culture is the internet. The internet is the same language that is uniting the whole world in the same opinion about God. They think they can bring about world peace by eliminating God, and together they will do it and remove God from world culture using the universal cultural language of the internet. And now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. Now, the last time that happened, God came down to see what they were building and didn't like it, and confounded their language so that the people left off to build the city. This time, I don't know what's going to happen. But something's going to happen, and it's going to happen soon, because it's the same scenario as the Tower of Babel. A crunch is going to come for the better or the worse, because the whole earth is of one language and one speech. But whatever happens, I will comfort myself with these words from Hebrews chapter 13, verse 12. Hebrews 13:12. Wherefore, Jesus also, that he might sanctify the people with his own blood, suffered without the gate. Let us go forth, therefore, unto him without the camp, bearing his reproach. For here have we Christians no continuing city, but we seek one to come. A city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Jesus said, "You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself." If you know that this world is evil, if you know that you yourself are a part of this dirty world, if you have begun to feel ashamed of that, if you want to get this dirt off you, because you are a sinner who needs forgiveness and wants to be pulled out of this world and taken instead to an eternal city of light and joy and purity and truth after you die, then will you ask God to forgive you today by the means of Jesus' blood shed for your sins, which purchases for you an eternal mansion reserved for you in heaven? Turn your back on this doomed city of Babel, which traps you in its vanity, and instead ask Jesus for a mansion in the city whose builder and maker is God. He will give it to you.